Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Hello and welcome to the Gegenpressing podcast. My name is Stefan Binkowski. He's Manu, he's Matt Ford. And this week, I'm hosting the show because I had my in-laws run at the weekend and didn't watch any football. And that's really the only way that we could shoehorn me into the show because I really had nothing else to say. That's not to say I won't be offering my opinion because, as long-time listeners will know, I struggle to keep my opinions to myself. But at least on paper, Matt and Manu are chosen opinionators today. Matt, I'll go with you first. How you doing, buddy?
All right. It sounds like I saw more football than you. I didn't go to the most exciting game of the weekend. I was in Leverkusen on Friday night. It was record-breaking. I think we've established that, although we've always tried to work out precisely what record it was. But there were a few records involved. And quite a little bit of the action. Bit of Bayern, bit of Dortmund, bit of Stuttgart. So, yeah, enough to get our teeth into, I think.
I think so. Manu, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I have to say, despite you being off on the weekend, you still managed to, on Sunday, and this is a great word that Matt learned last week, pisacken me about what was going on within the Bundesliga games. And pisacken is, of course, bordering me and like pointing at me and asking me what's going on with the Dortmund game. Pisacken, of course, a nice Munich word. Matt, I think.
I was grateful for some Bavarian lessons off Manu. That's my Bavarian word of the week.
Yeah, I was getting the goal updates on my phone when I was out for lunch, I think it was, or maybe it was dinner, I can't remember. And I was just putting in the group chat, I was like, oh, Dortmund. And then I was like, oh, Hoffenheim. I was like, no, oh, Dortmund. So yeah, there's a wee taster of what's to come. But we've obviously got Dortmund. We're going to jump into the Leverkusen game, Bayern, and as Matt said, we'll try and grab the Cologne game as well versus Stuttgart, and a lot more as well if we can, as much as we can squeeze into 45 minutes, really. And that will all be coming right after this break. BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your basketball wagering needs, including pro and college hoops throughout the year. With up-to-the-minute odds, stats, and trends, you can follow your favourite team's path to the playoffs with in-game live betting, contests, and all the best player props. Experience the world's best wagering platform anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices. Head to BetOnline today to become part of the team and remember to use the promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Yeah, so Matt, Leverkusen made history on Friday night. 33 games, if I'm not mistaken now, unbeaten. We did, as you said a moment ago, we did have to kind of figure out what those 33 games constituted. And it does, of course, mean all competitions going all the way back to that semi-final defeat to Roma in the Europa League last season. So this is obviously in the German Cup, Europe, and the Bundesliga. And, you know, for anyone who maybe missed this game, Matt, it was a game that Bayer Leverkusen won 2-1 against Mainz. On paper, you know, pretty straightforward. But the goals kind of came quite, probably fair to say, quite unorthodox means. Would that be a fair way to say?
Yeah, in both cases, and the Mainz goalkeeper Robin Zentner having a pretty big part to play, not just in the two goals, but also on a few other occasions throughout the game. If Leverkusen go on to win this league, the 2-1 win at home to Mainz is not going to be one that stands out as a big moment. Apart from perhaps in the history books in terms of, you know, the moment they went 33 games unbeaten. It was also Florian Wirtz's 100th Bundesliga appearance. He became the fourth youngest player to do that. He's 1 day younger at that landmark than Jamal Musiala. And as some people pointed out, I think rightly, had he not been out for the best part of a year with that ACL tear, he'd probably have hit that landmark a lot earlier. And it was also Robert Andrich's 100th game for Bayer Leverkusen, I think, in centre midfield. So quite a lot of records being broken. Granit Xhaka tried to get a record for the quickest Bundesliga goal. Not quite. I think it's 2 or 3 minutes. Took me by surprise. But at first glance, and I'm interested to see what you two think of this, at first glance, I thought that Robin Zentner should have been doing better with that. I think Granit Xhaka, I think he has hit it well. I don't think it's right in the top corner, and I wonder if Zentner's been caught cold a little bit there in the third minute.
It's a tricky one, right? Because does he get his hand on it? Trying to recall, because
no, it goes up over the top of him, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, usually my rule is this is one all my goalkeeper coaches have always taught me: if you get your hand on it, you better stop it, even if it's just your fingertips, because it meant you can reach it, right? Which means you can probably find a better solution to keep the ball out of the net. I do think that's a really tricky shot overall. I do think he had an odd performance, didn't he? Because he had moments of brilliance, and then he had moments like the second goal. And they also, I think he stumbled once as well.
Yeah, there was some tougher shots that came. Some tough shots that came his way, particularly I think from Xhaka again. I think from Andrich. So Andrich was the winning goal. But there was a couple of other efforts from Granit Xhaka which I thought were hit a lot harder and a lot better, which Robin Zentner dealt with a lot better. He also recovered well from a couple of his own errors, which I think once in the build up. Mainz trying to play it out from the back, which they actually had some success with at times, but on a couple of occasions they also ended up giving the ball away and inviting Leverkusen on. Zentner did get back to save the day there on a couple of occasions, and then I'm sure people would have seen the way that the winning goal comes about. It wasn't as if Bayer Leverkusen didn't deserve to come away with 3 points, but obviously the way it came about was pretty unfortunate for Zentner fumbling the ball the way he did.
But you make your own luck, right? Like you force the error, and yes, the goal comes, and it's extremely deserved at that stage. But this is the kind of thing where you put a pressure on your opponent until the opponent breaks, and you don't know how the opponent will eventually break. In this case, it was Zentner making a huge mistake to allow the second goal. But at the end of the day, you look at this result and you say, yeah, that's very well deserved. I'd have thought after this game, I kind of sense and feel that Leverkusen are really just getting by at the moment until Boniface comes back, right? They're like, let's just grind out these results until we get a proper number 9 who can score on a regular basis for us again. And if we get through the stretch until the end of March, right? Because he comes back in April. And we have to remember too, March is going to be shorter because of the international break, right? So I kind of sense at the moment they're just like, oh, if we win all games in March and then we get Boniface back, we're in a really good place.
It's actually a little bit counterintuitive that they seem to be not struggling, that's the wrong word, but they've become less spectacular against some of the lower teams in the league where they probably are missing that number 9. I think, perhaps paradoxically, you can get away with not having a proper number 9 up front and play with 3 number 10s when you're playing against the likes of Bayern or Stuttgart, because the game is so much more open. You can hit them on the break more. You can combine a lot more. I don't think you're going to get that much joy out of even a Bayern Munich at the moment with just bagging balls into a big centre forward. However, they can make the difference against some of the lesser teams. But yeah, 2 really hard fought wins away at Heidenheim, then at home to Mainz. There was a couple of little observations that I thought regarding Xabi Alonso, and I wouldn't necessarily read too much into it, but I thought he was one of the angriest I've ever seen him. It was partly to do with the referee performance. He was definitely frustrated at that, and I think he was frustrated. He did, yeah, and he was frustrated as well. I think at particularly the hard physical approach that Mainz took to dealing with Florian Wirtz. Sylvain Widmer definitely seemed to have been tasked with taking Wirtz out of the game and went into him pretty hard on a couple of occasions in the first half, which had Xabi Alonso quite upset. However, the booking came on a Leverkusen counter-attack when I think it's Unwini who has been, seemingly brought down Frimpong. Frimpong definitely thinks he's been brought down.
Yeah. He was brought down. 100%. There was contact there.
Yeah, there was little bit of contact, and going at that pace, and you can see how Frimpong has gone flying. And I talked to, well, not necessarily talking to, I overheard a lot of the Mainz analytical staff at half time, all absolutely insisting that it was a dive. Look at Frimpong getting wound up. He's just upset because he's dived and not got a free kick for it. I think there probably was probably was contact at that pace. But yeah, that's what got him booked for complaining. It's also what got Xabi Alonso booked for complaining. Didn't stop Alonso from legging it over to the referee at half time and having a go at him on the pitch and walking off with him. So yeah, one of the more agitated that I've seen Xabi Alonso. Again, I wouldn't read too much into it. I'm not suggesting that the pressure's getting to them or anything like that. But just, I just thought it was interesting to see.
Yeah. I mean, if he's getting frustrated at cynical challenge against Mainz, God help him when they come up against Cologne next weekend in the derby, particularly when it comes to tackles on Florian Wirtz, who, as listeners will probably know, isn't exactly well received, shall we say, by Cologne fans. Obviously, a former academy player.
It was actually against Cologne, wasn't it? That he tore his ACL. I mean, not necessarily from a bad tackle, necessarily a bad tackle, but that was.
I think there was a bad one in the. I think there was a bad tackle in the 3-0 win at the start of the season as well, if I'm not mistaken. That got some news, maybe. Don't know. But yeah, no, it's really fascinating how Leverkusen are kind of rumbling on. Their XG was actually really low in this game. It was 1.2, I think I saw. Mainz's wasn't far off that themselves, and I mean, I'm kind of okay with the goalkeeper for the first goal. You can kind of see he almost kind of steps back, thinking, "Oh, that's going over," then just kind of dips in, and I can see. And when you see it from the second angle, like from the kind of linesman's view, you really do see how it just kind of dips just under the crossbar. Obviously, the second goal is just an absolute howler, and that alone is really what kind of gave Leverkusen all 3 points here, I suppose. Now, it was only the 70th minute, so they had like an extra, 20, 25 minutes to obviously turn it around. But
the game was over.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, at that point, yeah. And then, of course, Mainz get a red card. But if that, it's a kind of interesting what if. And as you guys talk about how they are just kind of doing enough to get by these games. And, Derby aside, they've got Cologne next, which you'd expect them to do something similar in. Wolfsburg, who haven't exactly been aren't exactly the Harlem Globetrotters when it comes to scoring goals. Freiburg, who've been struggling. Hoffenheim before that, who this weekend's result aside have been in poor form. And then they've got Union Berlin, Werder Bremen, Dortmund and Stuttgart. But by that point, that kind of stretch at the top of the table may have increased. Who knows? So, as you said, Manu, they're just kind of maybe just biding time until they can bring Boniface back. Because if you actually look at the match winners in that squad, the thing that really intrigues me about Leverkusen is that perhaps Jonas Hoffmann's a perfect example of this, where so many of these players who on paper are good individual players, they've just kind of slotted into kind of almost like supporting roles for Wirtz this season, where Hoffmann just does so much running for him. Adley just does so much running for him. Obviously the two white players just play off him tremendously well. But it also means that if Wirtz isn't the guy scoring the goals or setting up the goals, it's not like someone like Klozik can exactly step in and win the game for them, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You just looked at the match calendar here, and they have 3 games until the international break, right? And then in those 3 games, because you said they were rumbling on. Let me just recap this here. Obviously, they have Köln next week, which I think is actually going to be a pretty tricky game. Then they have Wolfsburg on a Sunday. Then they have Freiburg in Freiburg on a Sunday. Lots of Sunday games, obviously, because of the Europa League fixtures, right? Then they have essentially 2 weeks off because of the international break. And then after the international break, they have Hoffenheim. And then I actually expect Boniface to be back at maybe as early as like the Union Berlin game, right? Because the projection was April. So you really need to just get through these next 3 games to be in a really good position. And you're right, attacking wise, it's going to be about Florian Wirtz and the way he carries the team, and maybe hopefully get Patrick Schick going in one way or another. But I don't know. I just get the sense they're just grinding out results at the moment. And if they get to the international break with this 8-point gap, maybe 11 or 10 points, who knows? So let it be down to 5. You're in a really good place. I'm just repeating myself here, but I think you're in a really good place.
Yeah, well, Matt, unless you have any final thoughts on Leverkusen, I might move on to another team who have not been grinding out results in Bayern Munich. Any passing comment before we move on? Nope. I don't know if Matt's... You still there, Matt?
I am now, but I lost you for about 20 seconds.
That's all right.
I think
that's actually perfect. I was asking if you had any final comments for Leverkusen.
You should have just moved on.
I should have just moved on. Yeah, that's why I'm not the host. Anyway, I'll just do that segue, even though I've already kind of linked to it, from one team who have been grinding the results to one team who hadn't up until this weekend, but arguably did. Is obviously Bayern Munich, who picked up a 2-1 win over Leipzig. Manu, this was such an interesting game. We were talking about it with our subscribers in the subscriber chat. At one point, I kind of summed it up as two teams who don't really seem to want to win this game, two teams whose seasons are all but over. It felt very much like a match that, typically around maybe like, May time or April or something, when Bayern have already kind of won the league, and it's Leipzig versus Dortmund, and they're just kind of sharing blows between who finishes second, third. It kind of had the feel to me of that kind of game. But I'd love to know what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I don't think Bayern Munich are going to give up on the title until Bayer Leverkusen hold the title up at wherever they're going to celebrate it, right? I mean, the joke in Germany is Leverkusen come with a title because their city hall doesn't have a balcony to celebrate it from. I've been told by a Leverkusen fan they're just going to do it at either the castle or at the stadium. But, until the moment that Xabi Alonso and Granit Xhaka are parading around Leverkusen with that title, I think Bayern Munich are not going to give up. Having said that, it does seem like a little bit of a futile endeavor in some ways, because even this game, there's a couple of things that I really liked. Let's start with the positives before we go into the negatives, right? I think that with the freedom of being relieved of his position, Thomas Tuchel finally gets his lineup right. And I think that tells you a lot about the internal politics at Bayern Munich, is that Joshua Kimmich is playing where I think he's actually at his best, and that's right back. He put Pavlovic in that number 6 position next to Goretzka, which I think is, we will probably see something very similar for Germany, right? With Toni Kroos coming back, Kimmich's position in midfield is now gone. Nagelsmann has pretty much confirmed that in various, there was a big interview with Spiegel, for example, where he said Kimmich is going to be a right back, Kroos is going to play in midfield. The writing on this has been on the wall. I think it tells you a lot about the internal politics at Bayern Munich, that no coach has attempted it until the coach had nothing to lose anymore. And that's the case here with Thomas Tuchel, right? Because the moment Thomas Tuchel is no longer have to worry about his job, he's like, well, fine. I'm going to put the guys where I think they're best. And that is right back for Joshua Kimmich. That is left back for Guerrero. Dyer is playing. That's one that I thought it was a little confusing, but Musiala on the left, Müller in the middle. From a selection perspective, I actually thought he got that spot on, and the result turns out that he was right. Has Kimmich played his best game as right back in this particular match? I don't think so, but you can definitely tell that he's more influential from that position than he is maybe even from the middle. And he can give Bayern Munich another dimension, because you have another playmaker in a different area of the field. And yeah, I find that enormously interesting. Does that mean everything at Bayern Munich is now fixed and good to go? I'm not sure, because you still have the wobbles. There were many moments. I actually thought when it was 1-1, Leipzig looked like the more likely team to make it 2-1 and maybe walk away with the win here. Then, of course, you get the magic, and that's why Harry Kane was 100 million euros, because he scores an unbelievable goal to make it 2-1. And, it's been too long that we've seen that from him as well, this kind of performance where he scores 2 goals. So that's good news for them as well. But, Stefan, I still sense that this team has more wobbles in them. And I would actually say this formation that we saw here, that's going to be for the Champions League run, not for the Bundesliga.
Yeah, it was so interesting, the kind of lineup that he went with, and he kind of made his excuses for why. For example, Dyer in for Kim. He said Kim's still not 100% fit. The reason that Kimmich's at right back is because he's the only player, one of the few players who can still play that position, even though Konrad Laimer was obviously on the bench. And yeah, it felt very much like a performance where no one had any real expectations on their shoulder. one of the things that really stood out to me was just how much Thomas Muller and Tuchel were kind of laughing at the sidelines. Every time the camera cut to the sidelines, it was him and Muller just kind of joking around with each other, which I'm almost certain we never saw up until last week's announcement. Matt, this is such a bizarre situation for Bayern to be in at the moment, isn't it? Where they've got head coaches for more or less being sacked or about to leave. And, they're picking up wins against what are supposed to be the second or third best team in the league. And everyone's joking and smiling on the sidelines.
Yeah, Tuchel's repeated on quite a few occasions that sort of denying that his team had got his freedom back to play, or that the weight had been lifted and anything like that. He kept insisting. I think he got a point. He kept insisting that he's not the problem here. He certainly doesn't see himself as the problem, obviously. But the actions speak louder than words. In terms of, like you said, Thomas Müller did look like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. It wasn't just in his personal interactions with Tuchel. I thought even the build of the first goal, the way he suddenly drifts out into, effectively he's a right winger, picking the ball right on the touchline, beating a man before continuing the attack. I wonder if that's perhaps what Müller meant in previous weeks when he said things like, we don't have that freedom in our heads to play, to drift where we want to drift, to fall into positions that we'd like to. I think similar can be said for Rafael Guerreiro's performance, the way he's constantly made that transition from left back into that sort of left half space, and the cross for Kane for the first goal is a perfect example of that. He's brilliant in that position. One game sticks in my mind, a derby for Dortmund away at Schalke last season, where Guerreiro plays a similar role in that midfield and absolutely runs the show. So that's absolutely his best position as far as I'm concerned. Nevertheless, still the best occasions to watch Bayern though were when they got some acceleration into the game. There were still too many periods of play where they were a little bit, I thought, slow and ponderous still and lacking in creativity still. However, there were more occasions where they added that penetration and that acceleration into the game. And I think it's the second goal is a good example again. Guerreiro and Musiala adding that acceleration from the left hand side. And the way Guerreiro fed the ball inside, obviously it's Musiala who's then provided the assist ultimately, but it's in that same position where Guerreiro scored against Union Berlin about 30 seconds after the start of the second half in that game, and that was the only moment in that game where we saw any sort of pace or penetration or acceleration from Bayern at all. And it was the same against RB. I thought they were better when they brought that into the game. Maybe it's too late now to suggest that that's the way forward, because Tuchel's never going to have a chance to show that. But they were my thoughts. On a negative side, so I thought as good as Pavlovic was in an offensive sense, there were times increasing in the second half where Bayern's midfield went completely walkabouts and RB were able to just progress through it so easily and get shots on goal. And they had Neuer to thank for making a couple of great saves from Šeško.
He was good. Neuer was really good in this game. Which one was it on? I'm trying to remember. Was it Šeško? Where he made that almost...
There was two, actually. There was two similar saves in the space of a couple of minutes, but one is particularly brilliant one-on-one when he gets his hand out.
The second one, where it was almost like a hockey style, or ice hockey to use the European term, style save. And not only does he stop the ball, but he keeps it. That is incredible hard to do from an athletics standpoint. And I thought, wow, that was really good. And that was one of those really big moments. Of course, Leipzig then equalized afterwards, right? But there were so many moments where I thought Neuer was really good in this game. You're right about...
I was just going to say, well, I'll maybe let you finish a Pavlovic point, and then maybe you can move on to Leipzig. I'll go on and finish your point, actually, then I'll jump in.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, Pavlovic, I think we have to remember he's only 19. And that is the crazy thing about the way he's been performing, that he's getting this amount of playing time. Kind of in the face of people saying Tuchel can't develop young players, right? Because I would point to Pavlovic right there and say, look, Bayern didn't buy him a number 6, and he went to the academy and found one. And I think he found one who was actually really good. Was playing in a really, really important position for one of Europe's biggest clubs at the age of 19 is very impressive. And yeah, he's not by no means the finished product, but you can see his potential is incredible. So
yeah. I mean, the question is though whether he's number 6 or number 8, and I can agree with Matt in the sense that he does seem to be more like Goretzka in the sense that he has that tendency to want to get in the box and score, create chances, which might still leave holes in that midfield. But to kind of turn the attention towards Leipzig now, Manu, they had their chances. They obviously got a goal, which, let's be honest, was a deflected shot. Their XG was actually quite low, despite maybe a handful of half-decent chances. And I saw one subscriber, who I think was a Leipzig fan, saying this is just so much like the Real Madrid game recently in the Champions League, where there's kind of moments from Leipzig, but for the most part, it just feels inevitable that they're going to let this game slip away from them. And the thing that I find quite intriguing is that whereas Tuchel has legitimate injury concerns and lack of depth in certain positions, not just in terms of Pavlovic or having to play Eric Dyer as centre-back, but the fact that Eric Choupo-Moting is having to come on in these games to kind of win them for Bayern is itself a terrible indictment on the club's transfer policy over the last couple of seasons, in my opinion, despite the fact he did a very good job and all credit to him. But yeah, that's a discussion maybe for another day. Leipzig, on the other hand, are only missing one player and they go into this game, Klosterman. And, we're looking at a squad here that's been expensively assembled. Marco Rosa was brought back as the, Mr. Red Bull. And yet, every time I watch Leipzig, I just kind of think, what's the point in this team? And I don't mean that in a very kind of existential 50+1, what's the point of Red Bull Leipzig in the German football? I mean, what's the actual team of this footballing? What's the point of this footballing project? Because it feels to me like every time they come into these big games, they just kind of seem to wither.
I mean, yeah, that's true, but they're also one of the few teams in German football that go regularly to the Allianz Arena and get something done there, right? That would be my counterpoint to this. I think that this season in particular, Marco Rose is learning some tough lessons. I thought it was a huge mistake to take Xavi Simons off in the 87th minute for Elmas, for example. 3 minutes later, Bayern make it 2-1, right? You're not taking... I understand that you need fresh legs and all that sort of stuff. We're going to talk about another coach who likes to bring on fresh legs for the fresh legs' sake. But that it felt like that to me here. Xavi Simons is a player who brings an enormous amount of stability to that midfield. He can hold the ball, he can bring you security, he can create that little bit extra. In a big game like that, you keep that player on until the very end. And, I remember saying it in the Substack chat at that moment. He's like, when he took Xavi Simons off, I'm like, that's a mistake. And literally 3 minutes later, Harry Kane made it 2-1, right? And you see that many times this season. And we haven't really seen it in the past with Marco Rose, with his decision-making. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's him second-guessing. Maybe it is the riches of choice that he has, right? Maybe it is because the entire team is healthy and maybe he has all these players and it's like, oh, well, we bought Elmas for, 30 million euros in the winter. We have to give him some playing time because how else are we going to justify it, right? I just think that maybe, sometimes it's better to be a little bit spoiled for choice, not spoiled for choice, rather than the other way around. And I see it there. And this was Leipzig's game for the taking. And I think in the end of the day, it was the coaching decisions that kind of threw it away.
Yeah. Matt, I kind of made a point at full time on Twitter that if they hadn't picked up Xavi Simons on loan this season, I really do think Leipzig would probably be struggling far further down the pitch, the table than they are now, and they probably would be amongst the pack of your Werder Bremens and your Frankfurts and the like, and probably kind of maroundering around kind of mid-table. What do you think of this team and what it's actually got going for it? Do you see it going forward? Do you see it going backwards? Do you think Marco Rose maybe should be under a bit more pressure?
I do see it going forward, but very slowly. I think, as you both said, this was probably the first time this calendar year, and arguably even go back to the start of the season, they've had that proper first 11. Klosterman aside, although with the slight caveat perhaps of Dani Olmo not being quite fit, I don't think yet. And as for Šeško's clinicalness in front of goal, I think it is a problem. It absolutely cost them in Munich. But then again, he's also only 20. And I sort of see some parallels there with the pressure that maybe he's been put under, the expectations of him there, almost compared with someone like Rasmus Højlund at Manchester United, and being that leading striker, but still being a young player, essentially. I was a little bit, particularly in the first half, disappointed in RB's midfield. Who I think in the same way that Bayern let them sort of walk through the centre of the park a lot in the second half, I thought RB were guilty of that conversely in the first half, which is surprising because that defensive pairing of Haidara and Schlager is absolutely one of the two sort of double holding midfield partnerships in the league. But I think at one point Haidara, I think he gets spun really easily. Is it Pavlovic or Musiala? I can't remember who it was precisely. Schlager as well. Maybe he's a little bit unlucky with that tackle in the build up to Harry Kane's to the winning goal, where it's the winning goal where it's his tackle on Musiala, where in the end I think it's actually Schlager who touches the ball onto Kane. But positioning wise, would perhaps have expected him typically to be slightly better positioned for that challenge. So disappointing from that point of view. But ultimately, if Šeško finishes one of those chances, particularly in the second half, because they were the better team in the second half, then they could have got something out of it. One little thing to come back on that Manu said before, I just if I looked absent for 30 seconds or so before, it's because I was just double checking how many results they'd got at the Allianz Arena. I mean, they've only actually won there once in the league and 2 draws. So I wouldn't necessarily class Red Bull as a team who have gone to Munich and often got something.
But they don't melt away.
They're no Leverkusen. They're no Leverkusen.
No Leverkusen.
But they also don't melt away like a certain team in black and yellow.
Yes,
and
we can talk about now if you want. But no, you're absolutely right, Manu. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And like, even just to jump on what Matt was saying, actually, the Schlager is such an intriguing player in this team because, I mean, maybe I'm being unfair, but I actually think he's more of a kind of squad or a backup player in the grand scheme of things, who has been kind of thrust into the starting 11 out of necessity more than anything else. And I think he's a very solid player to a point, and he does his job very well, which is to kind of break up plays, make tackles, interceptions. But the fact that this entire team more or less pivots off of him almost single-handedly at times, unless, maybe you have someone like Haidara in there who can play defensively, but more often than not, the whole team's pinned on him, basically, defending like a champion week in, week out, especially when he played these better teams. And at times it does feel like this team's almost quite top-heavy, even though it is at the same time, and maybe paradoxically, they still rely on one attacking midfielder and Xavi Simons to kind of win the day for them every week.
One little comment in Xavi Schlager's defence is that I think for one of the saves that Neuer pulls off from Šeško, it comes from an absolutely perfect pinpoint pass from Schlager out of the same position that Guerrero played his pass for Bayern into Kane for that header. And I maybe it sounds overly critical, but I am a fan of Xavi Schlager's. I think he's a good midfielder. I think he offers bite and tenacity defensively, and he's shown that he can also play really sort of finesse through balls as well. So he's more than just sort of a physical rampaging machine around midfield. He has also got a creative side to his game as well. I just thought that particularly in the first half, that midfield pairing went completely missing.
BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your basketball wagering needs, including pro and college hoops throughout the year. With up-to-the-minute odds, stats and trends, you can follow your favourite team's path to the playoffs with in-game live betting, contests, and all the best player props. Experience the world's best wagering platform anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices. Head to BetOnline today to become part of the team, and remember to use the promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Yeah. Well, to steal Manu's placed transition there from one team who sometimes bottles it against Bayern to a team that almost always bottle against Bayern, Dortmund, who in a kind of roundabout way kind of did poorly, then did really well, then did poorly all over again, and they're through to 3-2 defeat to Hoffenheim. Guys, I didn't catch this game. I plan to watch it after we record here because I'm doing my newsletter on Dortmund this week. But what was the kind of... This gets one thing straight, because I think this is context is needed for this result, this performance, and Hoffenheim's opening goal. Matt, maybe you could explain this if you want, or either one of you jump in. Mats Hummels was not included in the matchday squad. Then we saw reports that he was driving to the game on his own, so not taking. So usually these teams travel to these games on a coach. They usually stay in, I think, I'm not sure if this is the case with Dortmund at home games, but they usually stay in a hotel beforehand, the night before, so the club can keep an eye on the players. They all go to the matches together. Mats Hummels wasn't there for any of that. He obviously wasn't deemed suitable to start the game. Emre Can starts as centre half, and Hoffenheim's opening goal is an interception made when Emre Can tries to pass the ball across the Dortmund goal, and Bebu latches onto it and scores a goal. Who wants to kind of jump in there and maybe explain what the hell is going on there?
I just think it's so much of it's like Groundhog Day watching them. I mean, that build up, or attempted build up to play out from the back between Emre Can and Schlotterbeck was reminiscent of the goal that they gave away against Bochum. Again, trying to play out from the back and completely caught. That ended up in a Schlotterbeck own goal. This ended up with Bebu firing into the top corner. So yeah, Groundhog Day from that point of view. And then at the other end of the pitch, Groundhog Day in that they simply couldn't create anything. That was despite having Brandt back. It says a lot that the 2 goals they did score actually came from set pieces, which I think is quite un-Dortmund like. It's just not even that the 2 goals they scored were really were sort of like well created chances with good build, where you could see clearly what the patterns were. That's all still lacking. I feel like I was missing a little bit. I admittedly only saw the second half, and I did see a few people, including yourself, Stefan, saying that that in that first half, particularly apparently there was a 20-minute period where Dortmund were really, really good and could have scored 2 or 3. It certainly wasn't the 20, 30, 40 minutes that I saw in the second half. So yeah, I've no idea what happened at half time, because that certainly wasn't what I saw. I just thought
that was Manu.
I thought it said a lot.
Speaking actually, that was Manu who put that in the group chat, because I didn't catch the game. So maybe I should have went to you first, Manu, since you're the guy who watched this game live from start to finish. What did you make of the game?
I am still baffled on how Dortmund gave this game away. As stupid as they were, and there's no other way of putting it. I'm not being polite here, because they don't deserve to be polite, but they were stupid to give away that first goal. And then I thought their reaction was really good. They made it 1-1, they made it 2-1. And then there was a moment where I thought, okay, they're going to make it 3-1, 4-1, 5-1. They're going to just, it was one of those Dortmund moments where the stadium really comes alive and they really start to press. And then all of a sudden it was like a collective, oh, we've won. Let's take the foot off the gas and just pass the ball around and be conservative. And I'm like, what's going on here? This Hoffenheim team was so dead. Like, this could have been a horrible night for them at the Westfalenstadion. Like, it could have been really, really, really bad. And
Manu, could I actually jump in there for a minute before we move on? Just from that second goal, Nico Schlotterbeck scores the header, and he celebrates by clenching his bicep and pointing to it in front of the yellow wall. And I mean, I'm not a Dortmund fan. I don't go to the games. And to be perfectly honest with you, I find their misery quite entertaining. But if I was a Dortmund fan watching not just any Dortmund player this season, but that player in particular who perhaps more than anyone else in that team has not lived up to expectation, score a goal like that and then march off to the stand and, flex his bicep as if he was Cristiano Ronaldo, that would have just drove me insane. And
it's Stefan Kunz celebration, no? The bicep.
Was it?
Yeah, I also wonder. I don't know, but I wonder if it's a reference to Niklas Füllkrug. He's been doing that, I think, quite a bit.
But he got it from Kunz, I think.
Yeah, so maybe it's some sort of internal joke that we're all missing. And clearly the joke
we were literally missing it because
the joke is ultimately on Nico Schlotterbeck, because I think he's at fault in the build up to the Hoffenheim's third goal as well when they're trying to build up. And I mean, then again, it's that sort of catalogue of errors. They're trying to play out the back again, and it's gone wrong again. Ian Martson, who I think has been absolutely fantastic since this idea, but he's found himself far too far out the pitch, which means that Schlotterbeck's ended up trying to begin the build-up play from left back, and when it all goes wrong, it means there's nobody at centre back, and Hoffenheim are able to just walk through.
I mean, I tried to make this point, but they shouldn't even be in this situation in the second half.
No, they shouldn't.
This game should have kicked off the second 45 minutes with Dortmund being up 4-1. They had that momentum to really put a really poor Hoffenheim side to the sword, and it didn't. And we were going to talk probably about the substitutions as well, but you're seeing a Dortmund side here when Dortmund were at their best and a team was on their back foot. What would they do? They would absolutely crush that team, right? They would absolutely crush that team. And for whatever reason, this team was taught to take the foot off the gas pedal and be conservative and pass the ball around in a way that maybe a Man City or Bayern Munich do when Bayern Munich were at their best, right? You know what I mean? Like, you got the second goal and let's be patient and get the third and then the fourth. They don't have that ability. And if they have a head coach who thinks that the team has that ability, that is out of touch in reality.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, man. You hit your nail on the head there when you say there's this kind of weird kind of debate over, well, maybe it's not a debate, but it's the kind of, there's only two options here. Either the head coach isn't good enough, the players aren't good enough. And it does kind of lead into these kind of, well, yeah, and you're right. It can be both, absolutely. And it almost certainly is. But Matt, let me throw this to you. I've kind of got, I tweeted about this actually last night. I deleted the tweet because it was a little inaccurate, and I'll explain why in a moment. But Dortmund go away to Wolfsburg. Füllkrug scores in the 8th minute. Wolfsburg equalise in the 64th minute. In the 79th minute, Terzic takes off Royce, Sancho, and then Füllkrug comes off, and he brings on Bino Gittins, Moukoko, and Ozcan. 3 strikers off, 2 on. He then goes to PSV, a game that technically you would think Dortmund should be competitive in. They again score an opening goal. They then concede a late one. Not a late one, sorry. They concede an equaliser after the half time. He takes Royce off for Brandt. He takes Sancho off for Wolf. Takes Daniel Malin off for Ozcan. And then again replaces Füllkrug with Moukoko. In that situation, he took 4 forwards off and brought 2 on. And in this match, he brings off Füllkrug, Sancho, and Maatsen. As you mentioned, Maatsen probably one of Dortmund's best attacking players. And at the very least, he replaces him with 3 actual other forwards in Moukoko, Bino Gittins, and Adeyemi. But in each instance, it feels like rather than kind of carefully tweaking his team, Terzic kind of treats substitutions. It reminds me of like American football when they swap from offense to defense, and he just kind of hails on like 20 new players, like, right, you guys go have some fun with it. And it's almost like he just presses the reset button when things aren't working well and just kind of think, right, you guys go figure it out and see if you can, if just the sheer body count of new faces might kind of shock the opponents into letting us try and win this game.
Yeah, no, that's precisely it. And I mean, it's happening so often now. It's yet another of the Groundhog Day phenomena around Borussia Dortmund. It's less swapping like offensive players for defensive players or switching from attack to defense. It's more just, it literally is like for like, replace like for like. And with the best will in the world, I simply can't detect what more there is to it than that. And I think we've said enough. I've repeated it on loads of occasions that it does sometimes work for them, especially because the calibre of player that you're bringing on, the likes of this time it was Adeyemi, it was Mokoku, Jamie Bino-Gittens. They are absolutely players who can have an effect off the bench or who can have individual flashes. I can think of Adeyemi down the left wing away at Frankfurt, Mokoku on loads of occasions off the bench, Bino-Gittens away at Darmstadt. And this was the case last year as well. I think Bino-Gittens a few times off the bench. These players do have impact, but it really is getting... The evidence is stacking up now that they're having impact purely through the nature of them just simply being new legs, fresh legs. There's no particular change to the system. And I think the worst example of this was when they looked at their most desperate on the final day against Mainz last season, where they sort of just threw on Julien Duranville, who hadn't played off these, and it was just like, well, do something. Maybe some sort of individual action will come out of the bag. But this time, it wasn't there. This time, sometimes it comes off, but there's no particular plan behind it, and that's becoming increasingly the case. It's not going to get any easier now, because we've sort of been, or at least I've been critical of Borussia Dortmund since the start of the year, despite the wins. I think at one point they had 3 or 4 wins on the bounce, or unbeaten, and only conceded 1 goal. They'd caught up with RB, they'd overtook them and got into 4th place. But the performances weren't good, and everyone could see the performances were particularly good. But now it's going to get even harder for them, because they've not even got easy fixtures now, because they were wins against Cologne, against Darmstadt, against whatever, with all due respect. But now you've got just the next sort of 6 Bundesliga games. This is without even thinking about PSV. But the next 6 Bundesliga games: Frankfurt, Bayern, Stuttgart, Gladbach, Leverkusen, RB. This is going to be really, really, really tough for Dortmund to
watch
get to
them. They'll beat
Champions League.
Bayern in a year where they don't need to win this game.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, perhaps.
Well, Manu,
completely off.
Manu, let me ask you this, but so we can maybe put a cap on the Dortmund game, because you would expect them to probably get past PSV since it's a draw. They take a draw to the Westfalenstadion. But looking at that kind of run of fixtures, do you think Terzic will still be the head coach by the end of the season?
So I made 2 mistakes yesterday. One was that I went on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, and my second was that I looked up BVB and Edin Terzic, and going based on that platform's reaction of people who are Dortmund fans, I think it would be really tough to continue with Edin Terzic, but there is no way that Hans-Joachim Watzke is going to change the course. Anyone who's followed Hans-Joachim Watzke in recent months and the way he's sort of mapped this out for Borussia Dortmund, I think they programmed in a course, and if that course leads straight into the midst of the sun, so be it. They're going to stay to the course no matter what, and I don't see a coaching change here. I mean, Matt, maybe you feel different about this, but I get the sense this is a club led by a person who is unwilling to make any change at the moment.
No, I tend to agree. I don't think there will, but I don't think there'll be a coaching change before the end of the season. I absolutely think there will be one in the summer. I think that's nailed on. I can't see it, and especially if they don't get Champions League. And I think that is looking increasingly unlikely now. It's not like at Bayern where Champions League exit would absolutely accelerate the firing of the coach. I think we said last time that I suspect, I don't know, but I can imagine a possibility even at Bayern Munich that even though Tuchel has been, it's now all been done and dusted. They said he'll be there at the end of the season, then he's going. If they were to get knocked out by Lazio, I wouldn't be surprised if they brought that forward and they said, right, you got now, because that's literally the only reason he's still there. As for Dortmund, we sort of joked before. I said Dortmund can actually beat anyone on their day at home, and you said apart from Hoffenheim. so anyone good, or perhaps even or Heidenheim. Did we make this joke at the start of the season that Dortmund struggle against teams that begin with H and end in Heim? So, but you wouldn't be surprised if they beat PSV at home. I wouldn't be shocked in the slightest. Daniel Marlon was fantastic in the first leg.
And the Champions League performances have been good this year.
They really have been. And then with a little bit of luck, you get a manageable opposition in the quarter. Lazio in the quarters. And then who knows? I mean, genuinely, would it be a massive shock to see this Dortmund team suddenly in the semi-finals of the Champions League?
And who knows what happens after that?
Yeah, I think worse things have happened. But if they were to get beat by PSV, I don't know if they would pull the plug. I think they would still persevere with Terzic to try and get Champions League again via the league, which I don't think they will now because of the fixture list. I think it'd be too tough for them. And then they're going to be in the same situation in summer that Bayern Munich are in right now for the second time, and it'll be all change, big transition, complete restart at Borussia Dortmund, new CEO, potentially new sporting director, movements within the hierarchy, players out, players in, new head coach, and we'll go from there.
Well, the only thing that made me pause was the fact that I learned that Edin Terzic is on €3.5 million a season. That is a staggering amount of money for a head coach at Borussia Dortmund. And that, I mean, I wish I was at 3.5 million a season. But I mean, that comes also with the conservative Geschäftsmann Watzke, the conservative businessman Watzke may even consider that as a bit rich for a team that misses out on a top 4 spot.
But it does kind of feel like all the stars are still kind of aligning for Terzic at the moment, in the sense that there's no one really interested, seemingly, in breaking into that top 4 this season, except for Stuttgart. Frankfurt, Werder Bremen. Obviously, Bremen have done well to get back up there, but Freiburg, Wolfsburg, Gladbach, Union Berlin. These are all teams that would have been pushing. Hoffenheim as well, of course, up until this weekend's result.
And top 5 might be enough. And the top 5 might also be enough, right?
That was my next point. That first point is that all these teams who were pushing for kind of not top 4 per se, but like putting pressure on the top 4 last season have all fallen off. Dortmund could finish 5th and still get the Champions League. And unlike a Tuchel who could lose in the Champions League and then Bayern would say that's enough's enough, you could quite easily see Edin Terzic just kind of embracing this kind of farewell tour at the end of the season and having these heartfelt moments with a yellow wall, because he's a fan, and because at the end of the day the fans obviously still appreciate him and love him and for what he is, and that's fair enough. But that means that it's not like just sacking a Marco Rose or someone and saying, right, you've not done your job, thanks but no thanks. With Terzic, you can understand them saying, well, if we finish 5th and get Champions League, we might as well let him stay and say his goodbyes and things. And I think that probably would sum up the kind of malaise at Dortmund quite well, to be honest with you.
Two more remarks about that game. First of all, just because you mentioned standing ovations in front of the yellow wall and all that. A lot has been made in the German media about the whistles at full time in Dortmund. It is quite unusual. Definitely a contrast to the final league against Mainz, when you would have thought that was the absolute catastrophe that took place, and there were no whistles to be heard. There were loud whistles this time, although I thought it was quite telling. And I say this completely neutrally, and read into it what you will. But when you could hear all the whistles, the camera was panning straight onto the centre of the yellow wall, where it was quite obvious that it wasn't the sort of 500-600 ultras whistling. They were all clapping, doing some sort of clapping, whatever they do. So I just find it interesting sometimes that the different responses of, I suppose, different types of fans and people have different perspectives on it, that there were absolutely loud whistles from all over the stadium, but quite clearly not from that particularly hardcore group. So that was one observation I thought at the end, and maybe it just maybe that would end up saving Terzic's job, that sort of reaction. I don't know. And the other one, just quickly on Hoffenheim, Manu, you slagged them off quite a lot, saying they should have been battered in this game. But all credit to Max Bayer, who has been absolutely brilliant. He's been brilliant to watch all season.
I said they should have been battered in the first half.
In the first half, fair enough. But Maxi Bayer was again absolutely fantastic. Gets obviously a massive bit of luck with his shot, which deflects in. I'm pretty sure that shot's going towards the corner flag than going to the back of the net, but it's gone in there, so fair enough. And he's the only, I just checked Kicker's match ratings for the game, he's the only Hoffenheim player that ranks above or beneath 2. Kicker ratings are, number 1 is 1 out of 6 is good, 6 out of 6 is terrible. Every Hoffenheim player is around about 4 out of 6, so all bad, apart from Maxi Bayer at 1.5, man of the match.
Yeah. Guys, that's us now in 55 minutes.
That means we're done.
Which means we're done. But and as I said before we started recording the show, I'm here specifically to make sure you two don't record another 2-hour show. But Matt, I did promise I'd give you a chance to speak about FC Köln and the 1-1 draw with Stuttgart. So you have 60 seconds. You have 60 seconds starting now.
I also caught the second half of this game, and I thought it was really, really well-deserved point for FC down the bottom. Didn't see them getting a point there, and especially when they went a goal behind. But a couple of fantastic saves from Marvin Schreiber kept them in the game. Fazid Alidou was again a great option on the counter-attack. Actually should have won it for Cologne. Had a fantastic challenge for 1-on-1. Tries to go around the keeper rather than shooting first time. But yeah, really, really well-deserved point. Whether it's enough to keep them up or even help them get a result against Leverkusen next week, I don't know. They're a very limited team, but absolutely fighting spirit and a bit of a structure there increasingly to see under Timo Schultz. And 2 dropped points from Stuttgart.
Might did that
enough?
with 10 seconds. 10 seconds to spare, actually.
There we go.
So there we go. See, if I crack the whip, you guys can do this very quickly. So maybe we just need to do that more often.
Keep us in line.
This podcast could have been 4 minutes long.
Probably could.
I think that probably sums things up this week, guys. Manu, maybe you want to jump in and just kind of mention something about the matchday chat, matchday thread over the weekend. I didn't get much of a chance to jump into it. Do you have a standing total of how many messages we had this week or this weekend?
So Bayern won, and we still got almost 600. And it actually kept going all the way to Sunday. People were watching the Augsburg-Freiburg game. We're discussing that. And so, it went pretty much through the entire match day. We used to, basically, the Bayern game would happen. We would get 90% of our messages there, and that was it. It's really kind of spread throughout the entire match day now. It's a great community. Honestly, I think it's a really good alternative to some other social media platforms that have some questionable characters on it, because we don't seem to have many questionable characters other than us on that Substack chat. So I've been really enjoying it.
Apart from us three.
Yeah, apart from us three, yeah. If you interested in, checking that out, and you want more content than the 2 podcasts than we do as well, right? If you want to find a community and you want a bit more content every week, I think the Substack is a really good platform for that. So go check it out.
Yeah, and it's also subscribing also means you can leave a comment underneath this podcast as well, which our paid subscribers do as well under each other podcast. So it's also another opportunity to chat to people as well. And I think that about wraps it up. So I'll say goodbye. I'll say thank you for listening. Please consider subscribing to the Substack. Manu, I'll let you finish things off with your famous last words.
Well, one more thing. We have to say the show is brought to you by Bet Online, and then I'm going to say goodbye. Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.